Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another Monday This and That video where I talk about all kinds of different things. Use this as an opportunity to get you more updated on what's going on around here or answer a question or two. So let's get to the topics of today, starting off with the cinnamon roll. So I've been creating some new cinnamon roll recipes using some of the food powders I have on hand, and I wanted to share that with you. So I do have my basic yeast bread recipe, and I use that. It's my multi-purpose yeast bread recipe, and I use that for making my cinnamon rolls, pizza crust, loaf breads, rolls, hamburger buns, hot dog buns, and more, and I'll be linking to that down below. I also cover a bit in there on how I make cinnamon rolls as well using that same recipe. But today I wanted to share with you a couple of new recipes I came up with, and I'll probably keep doing some more experimentations. But the first one was using my apple powder right here that I made from apples I had dehydrated from our own apple tree, and I made apple cinnamon rolls, and those turned out quite good. So what I did was I took another jar of dehydrated apples down, and where I had the whole pieces, so I could heat them in some juice so they'd have a better flavor, so they could fully rehydrate, so I could put them on top of the cinnamon rolls. But then mostly it was about the powder itself. So I added some of the powder to the dough as I was making it. I put some of the powder in the cinnamon sugar blend that goes inside the cinnamon roll. And I put a bunch of it in the icing that I then drizzled on top of the cinnamon rolls when they were done. And then of course put the slices on top. Then in my second experiment, I did the same thing using my pumpkin powder, as you can see right here, also from my own homegrown pumpkin from my garden that I dehydrated up, and I cooked it first. So I cook it first when it comes to that. Then I spread it on my dehydrator trays and then dehydrate and then powder. And so all the same things, I added it to the dough, I added it to the center, and I used it to make the icing that went on top of the pumpkin cinnamon rolls. Actually, they were more of a pumpkin spice because instead of using just cinnamon, I also added some nutmeg and cloves. And I'm thinking that one might be my favorite. Really, really like the pumpkin. Now, several years ago, I also did a video on raspberry rolls. Now, those I don't call cinnamon rolls because I didn't use cinnamon in them, but the basic principle was still the same. I used freeze-dried raspberries that I had got from Mother Earth Products. I processed them up, and so they were into a powder, and mixed them in with the sugar and the butter that goes in the center of the rolls, and then also made an icing from it, and those were really good as well. So you could do the same idea using any kind of dehydrated berries or freeze-dried, either one, because berries are great because they're low in sugar. So once you dehydrate them, they should powder up just as easily as freeze-dried ones. So if, like me, you don't have or want a freeze dryer, then you can do that with a lot of your more lower sugar fruits. So the reason I could do that with my apples is my apples on our tree are a lower sugar. They're really great pie. They're great to just eat fresh, but they're also very good for pies and more. But because of that, they also make a great apple for being able to powder up. So I wanted to share that with you, just to realize that you can take recipes like that and be creative by using your different food powders that you've put up. And anyway, it's just fun. It's fun to experiment with some of this stuff. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about was some garden updates. We've had a couple of nice days lately. It keeps going back and forth. We might get a nice day and then it goes back to raining for several days. But we try to take advantage of those nice days when we can and get out there and do some work in the garden, you know, trying to get things cleaned up and ready for planting, because the first two things I'll be planting will be my snow peas and my potatoes. And I'll be doing that here either right at the end of March or 1st of April. Right around in there is when I plant those. So in the back is where I put the snow peas, and in the front is where I put the potatoes. So one of the things I've been having to do, because last year was I gave all of my garden areas a sabbatical. Well, I didn't do any cleanup really, other than what I had to, just to be able to keep things from overtaking everything. But in my front yard garden is where I grow my stinging nettle up right up next to the house. But because it went for another extra year, it had really creeped out quite a ways into the potato area. So I've been having to pull a lot of that back and actually cut it up with a spade so I could break up the roots. And a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but it's working. The chickens are loving it because I'm digging up some soil so they can get in there and get some more worms. So the chickens get free range of the garden until I start planting. The front yard garden and all the backyard garden areas are free range until I start planting things. Then they get fenced off from those areas. And one of the things I'm doing this year, because I not only have a lot of marshmallow plants, but I haven't done it in a few years, and it's time for me to start digging up some of my marshmallow plants and using the roots. And now's a good time to do it, because then I can start freeing up more space for other plants, because I have a blueberry plant that I might move into the main garden from a pot this year. I might wait one more year, but I haven't quite decided yet. And I need some space there along the outer edges where it's not going to shade out some of the annuals I grow in the center of the large garden bed in the back. And so I did that. I washed them up. I got one dug up. I want to get at least a couple more marshmallow plants dug up. I have a lot of marshmallow. So what I did this time, since we still have fires going right now, is I went ahead and chopped them up and just dehydrated the root next to the fireplace. And then the root has many uses. The whole plant is usable. In fact, I have my more recent video I'll link to down below on the benefits and uses of the marshmallow plant. And it was one of the most important herbs for me to grow. I really, really wanted to grow marshmallow because of all of its many benefits. And I love being able to grow it. So the root, the flowers, the leaves all get used here. And then the other thing I did was I went ahead and bought 3 more of these little pots, because I had to come up with a better way. These are succulent pots. I'll give you the link to these down below. I needed to come up with a better way for starting my seeds that would be less accessible to babies, but also wanted it to look nice. That's the thing I hate about starting seeds in my living room, was those black pots, and they just don't look very pretty. But also something that was narrow enough to fit on the windowsill. So we have a really big south-facing window that has 9 panes, so it's 3 and 3. And so I could fit 3 of these in each section where the panes are, so they're getting plenty of that light coming in. This is the last one I got to fill. So I'm using 4 of them to start tomatoes. So I'm going to do 4 different varieties of tomatoes, 2 of them for peppers. So I've got a total of 9 of these all the way across. And then the other 3 for some herbs. Even though I'm already growing those same herbs, I want to start more of them. Like echinacea, I always seem to lose a plant every year. And so every year I try to start more echinacea plants. So I've already started some echinacea seed, just did it yesterday, as well as some lovage. And then this one, I'm going to put some arnica, just in case my arnica doesn't come back from the last couple of years. I want to go ahead and start more in this little pot here. So, and then I haven't started the tomatoes yet, but I've started the peppers. I'm going to probably wait until the end of this week to start my tomatoes. I wanted to start my peppers earlier this time instead of starting them at the same time as the tomatoes, since they always take at least another couple weeks before they start popping up through the soil than the tomatoes. And so I figured I'd wait a little bit longer on the tomatoes, because these are pretty shallow little pots, and I want to make sure it gets warm enough outside. By the time they get big enough for me to move them out to the greenhouse, I want to make sure it's warm enough out there. So I didn't want to start them too early. I've made that mistake before. especially since these are shallower than the pots I normally would start them in inside. But this is my first year using these. I'm really hoping they're going to do well because they do look nice, and they are a lot harder for the babies to get to the way I've got everything set up in the living room. So that should keep them fairly safe from little baby hands. And then another thing is that I'm getting down to the bottom of my last batch of seasoned salt, so I'm going to need to get more made up. And so every now and then I like to bring this up whenever I've got to make another batch of something, just to remind people I do have recipes for my homemade seasoned salt, along with some other options of things you can add to your seasoned salt. So easy to make your own and also tailor it to your own taste. So I'll go ahead and put the link to that video in the description box down below if you would like to learn how I make mine. And then I recently had done a new video on wine making, and you can see back here behind my flowers, I've got that jug of wine right there brewing. It's getting into its second week right now. And when I was shooting that video and talking about a hose, for siphoning, I've always just used this long food grade tube, but I had to siphon it out by mouth, which I've always hated having to do. And so as I was talking about it and I went to look up some stuff on Amazon, I thought, I should just get myself one of those. So I got one that's specifically for that. So this goes down into your jug, and here's the cool thing. This one actually has a little filter on it, so that's also going to help filter out, some of the stuff from the bottom, the sediments. And then you just pump it up like this. So I'm kind of anxious to give this a try, and then this is how you're going to create that, pressure so it can start pulling the wine off the top. That's what you want to do so that you can keep as much of the sediments out of your wine or your mead as possible, and it will give you a clearer wine or mead. Now, repeated racking can also give you a clearer product, or you can use natural clarifiers like bentonite clay. I've never done that. I have come to realize I don't really care if my wine is a little bit cloudy and a little more natural. As long as it tastes good or is usable for making my homemade medicinal extracts or using for marinades or stir fries and whatnot. That's all that really matters. So anyway, I am anxious to give that a try. So when I go to do that, I'll give you an update in a later this and that video and let you know what I think about this particular setup. I'm really thinking that's probably going to work a lot better for me than the way I was doing it before. And then I had a question in relation to the video that came out this last week about where I was talking about some of my most unusual vinegars. And someone was asking me if they could use non-organic citrus peels. While I was doing that for a while just for cleaning because I couldn't always get all organic citrus, what I found is that when I used the non-organic citrus peels, I had a lot more issues getting my vinegars to properly ferment than when I use the organic ones. So even if you're only going to use it for cleaning and not internal use, not, consuming, I still don't recommend it, because what I believe is some of the chemicals and stuff that get into those peels when they're non-organic, or even if they've got the appeal on them, I don't know if they do that with the citrus or not, that can cause issues with the actual fermentation process. Now, you might be able to soak them in some other homemade vinegar and maybe get some of that off, but there's no guarantee. So I personally don't recommend it. You can give it a try and see how it works if you're going to use it only for cleaning. So just some things to consider. So there's some other things that can cause issues with your fermentation when it comes to, any ferment, is if you're using chlorinated tap water. And so, your city water is going to have chlorine in it. And though typically the amount of chlorine in there should not be an issue, it sometimes really can be an issue and prevent a good ferment, because the chlorine is going to kill the bacteria in yeast that is needed to get a good ferment going. So what I used to do before we started collecting rainwater and filtering it ourselves, I would have some of my glass jugs, they were just wine jugs, that I would put a piece of cloth over it. And because the opening was so small, I would leave them for like a week, at minimum of 3 days, because chlorine will evaporate out if exposed to air, and that will get the chlorine out. A faster way is to boil it, but you also, and the boiling can also remove the chloramine, but of course before you use it for fermenting, you're going to want it to cool down to room temperature so the heat does not kill the bacteria and yeast. So if you're adding a starter to it, in other words, or any fresh fruit or anything like that that's going to have the natural bacteria and yeast on it, then yes, it needs to be cooled down to room temperature before you add anything to it. And really, that was it for my this and that for the week. I didn't have a whole lot to go over this time, but at any rate, don't forget to check out the links I'll be putting in the description box, the cinnamon rolls and the seasoned salt. And also remember that I have my live channel where I do most of my live shows, which are going to typically be twice a week. Not all the time. Sometimes I can't always do them. But typically Wednesdays and Sundays are where I do my live shows. I try to do a short one on Sunday, earlier on Sunday on this channel, and then a longer form one later in the day on my second channel. And you'll find that linked in the description box down below. And then I also have my Rumble channel where I post all the same videos, but I can also put videos that are not allowed on the YouTube platform about certain topics that I'm just not allowed to speak about. So you might want to subscribe to all 3 of those. I also now have the Substack, but I still currently only have one post over there because things have been real busy, you know, finishing up my taxes and doing some other things. And so hopefully I can start making time just to put more posts over there. Just no guarantee on how often, maybe once a month, but you can subscribe to me there if you want to see something that's more in a blog type format. And if you have any thoughts, ideas, or any more questions, please put them in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.